Hello everyone, I'm Cameron, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to do another CD box set. Now today we're going to be doing Roy Orbison, the MGM Years box set. Now this is a box set I've had for quite a few years now, and I want to talk about the content that's in here, all the things we get and all the albums, and even some of the previous MGM releases as well. So yeah, we've got to remember this was released back in 2015 to acknowledge 50 years of when Roy signed with MGM. Roy signed with MGM in 1965, kind of just after the big success of his song Oh Pretty Woman in 1964, the year prior to this. And he was with the label for 8 years, and I'll explain what happened in between the MGM years and basically all the albums. So this focuses on all his albums from 1965 till 1973, so his first and the last albums with the label. And I'll explain all what we get in here. So we get all the albums remastered from the original multi-track tapes and a CD as well of B sides and singles that have never before appeared in a full-length Roy Orbison album, which will be cool, which is cool to have. So yeah, here's the front, nice picture. Spine, all the albums. Back. So the albums are There's Only One Roy Orbison, The Orbison Way, The Classic Roy Orbison, Roy Orbison Sings Don Gibson, The Fastest Guitar Alive, Cry Softly Lonely One, Roy Orbison's Many Moods, Hank Williams, The Roy Orbison Way, Big O, Roy Orbison Sings, Memphis, and Milestones. So quite a lot of album names with Roy Orbison in them. And a CD of MGM B Sites and Singles, like I said. And there's the spine with all the albums in it. So there's a slide out like that. And it comes with a really nice booklet, which I really like. Nice picture of Roy with pictures and liner notes and stuff like that. Liner notes, and pretty much talks about the whole MGM era from the start in 1965 until the end in 1973, and even after the MGM years, because some of these have been released before in different territories and in different compilations. There's a page falling out here, and all the remastering process of the MGM albums as well. And even the albums themselves. So the story behind Roy Orbison's MGM era was that 1964, as we all know, he'd released a song, Oh Pretty Woman, which became his big hit to that point and made him an international name. But around about that time, the label he was with, Monument Records, his contract was due to expire in the summer of 1965. And basically, his manager at the time, Wesley Rose, and the producer and founder of Monument, Fred Foster, were at odds whether to keep Roy on the label or not. And basically Wesley began to take over Roy's career and control of it, and basically was wanting Roy off Monument when the contract ran out. But Roy had 2 singles to do for Monument and recorded them. They didn't do anything, and then he moved to MGM just as the final Monument single, I think, came out, which was Say You're My Girl, which is a good song. And he signed the contract in July of 1965, and within probably the next day he was in the studio making his first MGM recordings. That's the book, and the resultant album was There's Only One Roy Orbison in 1965. A really good album. I really like this album. It's one of my favourite Roy albums. I love his MGM era as much as the Monument or even the comeback period with the Traveling Wilburys and the later stuff in the 80s, which was great as well. Great songs in here like Ride Away, which was a hit single. You Fool You was great. I'm in a Blue Blue Mood. Claudette, Afraid to Sleep, which is a favourite in the Orbison fan base. A lot of people love that song. It's one of my favourites too. Summer Love's a great one as well. Big As I Can Dream's good as well. The whole album's fantastic. It's one of my favourite Roy albums. And the CDs just slide out like this. They're packaged just like the original vinyls. And what I like is that they replicate the original MGM labels. So this is how the label would have looked back in 1965. Well, in America anyway. Now, he signed MGM and they had American distribution, and he'd been with a label, London Records, since 1960 in the UK when Only the Lonely was out, and he extended his relationship with the London Decca label for international distribution of the MGM catalogue. And I have most of the original vinyls of the MGM albums on the London label, but there's some I've got the reissues of in the box, so but we'll talk about them later on. Second album was the Orbison Way in 1966. Another really good album, one that I really like a lot. Crawling Back was a hit single as well, and that's a great song. Time Changed Everything is great, maybe. Breaking Up Is Breaking My Heart was another single, and that's another good song. A New Star, It Wasn't Very Long Ago. Yeah, but there's lots of songs I love in this album. He even has some songs with his backing group who are called the Candymen. And there's the CD, which looks like that. And there's a classic Roy Orbison in 1966. Again, another thing I love about the albums is the cover. I love the covers to some of these albums, especially this one. I quite like the picture with the cool car there. I own stereo pressings of this, and there's only one Roy Orbison, and a mono of this one on vinyl. And this is the stereo one I have. These are, I think, all are in stereo. Oh, two are the wrong way. I have all these. All these are all mixed from the Stereo Masters, I think. Another really good one, I really like You'll Never Be 16 Again, Pantomime, Twinkle Toes, which was a big hit single, Losing You, Where Is Tomorrow, No I'll Never Get Over You, Just Name for Rock, another name for Rock and Roll is a great song. Yeah, a lot of great songs in this album. There's just so many great ones in the MGM albums. But after the album had been completed and released, Roy was tragedy centred the MGM era, as we all know. And after this album, I think, was recorded and complete, his first wife, Claudette, was killed in a motorbike accident in 1966, which was a really huge blow for him at this period. But he was able to, despite the obviously huge loss it was, he was still able to continue working. And he was working on a lot of projects around about that time, including this one, Roy Orbison Sings Don Gibson, which part of the contract was that he had to release 3 albums a year from 1965 when he signed it until 1985, which was a 20-year deal. And he released a lot of material as a result of the contract and released like 3 singles a year, I think. So about 12 songs on an album, 12 or so songs on an album, and then 3 singles, so 2 songs per side, which about 18 songs per year. So something like that. And so this is a pretty good album. I have a stereo press of this one on vinyl as well. There's a label. The album big hit was Too Soon to Know, which was recorded a few days before Claudette's death, but it came out after. And it was subjected to a lot of criticism when it was released in 1966, especially in the British papers. They felt it was like referencing Claudette's death, but some fans actually defended the recording and said that they really liked the song, and it's one of my favourite Roy Orbison songs as well. So yeah, there's that one. And also, during the making of Roy Orbison Sings Don Gibson album, he was doing his first and only motion picture, The Fastest Guitar Alive, which was rumoured to be I think, an Elvis Presley reject. And this was part of the contract that Roy was to appear in like films during his time with MGM. But this was the only one he would do. It's not a bad album, but I haven't really listened to it as much. But I like Whirlwind, River, the title track, Pistolero, Best Friend, and There Won't Be Many Coming Home, which I have as a single as well. That was never released as a single in America, I think because there would probably be misinterpretation that it was about Vietnam at the time, so they released it only in the UK. Now, I'll talk about the global things when we kind of get to them, but this was not a global film or album for whatever reason. I don't think it was ever released in Australia, according to the book written by Roy's son Alex Orbison. Some of these albums were never global for one reason or another, I'm not too sure why, but it's not a bad album. Maybe I need to listen to it a bit more, but I've got this on vinyl. I have a US special disc jockey record, and I have an original mono on the London label, so got a couple of copies of this one. Next up is a really great album, Cry Softly Lonely One, also from 1967. Another really good album. Again, another great cover as well, with him in the car. There's the back cover. Now, I have a stereo press of this on vinyl, and they've changed the back cover. This is how the back cover would have looked in America, and the back cover in the UK version is a picture, I think, from 62 or 63, because he's wearing clear glasses on the back of that one. But this is a up-to-date picture of Roy, because he's got the dark glasses on. And the US versions were missing just one time. That was only on the international pressings on the London label, and that's the one I have, is a UK London pressing. But again, another great album. I like She, Communication Breakdown, the title track, Here Comes the Rain, Memories, Time to Cry, and Only Lives, great song. Loads of great songs in here. But this album in 1967 was never released in Australia and New Zealand for some reason. Even though She, Communication Breakdown, and Cry Softly Lonely One were all hits in Australia. I think Communication Breakdown was a big hit in Australia. But for whatever reason, the album never came out in Australia. So for some reason, you get an album with some hit singles in certain countries, and it doesn't come out in Australia for some reason. Which I'm not too sure why that was. And things get globally complicated when the next album, Roy Orbison's Many Moods, in 1969, and it did not come out in the UK for some reason. I have a 2015 reissue of this one on vinyl, which is part of the vinyl set of the box set. But again, around about this time, the MGM period, another part of tragedy. 1968, Roy was on tour in the UK, and he got the terrible news that his home had burnt down, and he'd lost his two eldest sons in the fire. And Roy kind of took time in 1968 off to kind of come to terms with his loss, and this album was actually pushed back further into the spring of '69, and it only came out in the US, Australia, and never in the UK, where the two tracks Walk On and Heartache were hit singles, top 40s in the UK, and they weren't released in the UK for some reason. This is another great album. I really like this one. Massively underrated. I like Truly Truly True. His version of Unchained Melody is a great version. Heartache, Amy, Good Morning Dear, What Now My Love, Walk On, and Try to Remember is a great nice closer on the album as well. And they changed labels, they changed label designs. They've gone for this really cool blue and gold MGM label that I really like. Very kind of cool looking. I'll talk about the sound quality of these remastered of the MGM CDs at the end. Next album was Hank Williams' The Roy Orbison Way in 1970, and this was only ever released in the United States, and there was never a single for it. So pretty much this album has kind of been forgotten, A, because there was no single, and B, it was only ever released in the States. So I can't imagine that it would receive much attention at the time, because Roy's records kind of dipped after Pretty Woman, especially in the US, but he was getting like more hits in like other countries. I can't really say too much about the album because I haven't really heard it in full a few times, but I didn't like it on first listen, but it grew me a bit more. I do quite like it now, but I haven't really listened to it for a long time. I need to give it another listen again. But I liked Hey Good Looking, A Mansion on the Hill, and I Can't Help If I'm Still in Love With You. And yes, there's some pretty good stuff on here, but I definitely need to give it another listen again. But next we have another one of my favourites, The Big O. This is from 1970 as well, and this album was only ever released in the UK, Europe and Australia, but never in the United States. Now the story behind this one was that Roy was wanting to had recorded a live album at Batley Variety Club in the UK while he was on his 1969 UK tour, and he was wanting to release a live album. His MGM contract had total creative freedom. But MGM did not want to release a live album for whatever reason, even though most of the songs on the album were monument hits. And I've got a CD of the Batley Variety Club recording in 1969, because they did release it later in the 90s. But it never came. But then he decided he would just make a live in the studio album with his backing group, who were called the Art Movement at the time, and they're a really good backing band. And this is a really great album. I think he'd done some stuff in Nashville as well as recording it in England. But there was another thing that happened. MGM refused to release this album, and London Decca in Europe opted to release it instead over in Australia as well. But there's a lot of great ones like Break My Mind, his version of Help Me Rhonda, Money, When I Stop Dreaming, Love and Touch, which was what was written by the Art Movement bassist Terry Woodlake, who was also Roy's road manager for the time they worked. Scarlet Ribbons, his version of the Harry Belafonte one. And Penny Arcade's a great one as well, which was a big hit in pretty much worldwide except for the US. But there's all the songs there. And we're on the London label, just like the original vinyl. I have the original mono versions, and I have the stereo. And this album did actually come out in mono, strange enough, even though it was at a time when mono was kind of on its last legs, to say the least. So there's that one. And during that period, London Decca stopped paying Roy, and he got into a dispute with the label over the payment, and basically he didn't really record anything in 1971, but the dispute apparently had been resolved by 1972, and he released Roy Orbison Sings in 1972. This is another really good album. This is one that I really like. I really like the track God Love You, If Only for a While, Rings of Gold, Harlem Woman, Changes, It Takes All Kind of People, and Remember the Good's a great song as well. A lot of great songs on this one as well. So my UK vinyl version has rearranged track listing. So it begins with Changes rather than God Love You. And it has Yesterday's Child, which appeared on Roy Orbison's Many Moods in 1969. But Many Moods, like I said, was never a UK release. So, it's a really good album. I really like this one. And we're back to the blue and gold MGM label. Just a few more to get through. Memphis, 1972. Not a bad album. I quite like it. Right at the title track, Run Baby Run, Why Woman Cries, I'm the Man on Susie's Mind, I Can't Stop Loving You, Run the Engines Up High, and his version of Danny Boy is a really great version. That was one of the ones they did for the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra albums, which I really like. And just that label. And this was the last sort of globally released MGM album, as after this London Decca let Roy out of the agreement in 1972. But there was one more album to come with before we get to the finale of the MGM period. So by 1972-73, Roy was kind of disillusioned with the label. He was kind of looking for a way to get out of the MGM agreement, and basically began to pick some of these songs to record so that he could just finish off the contract. And one of them was this, Milestones, and the resulting album was this, Milestones. It's not a bad album actually, but it's one I kind of need to give another listen again. But I recently got this on vinyl earlier this year. Really like I Wanna Live, Blue Rain Coming Down, Drift Away, the first of Sweet Caroline, and The Morning After is good as well. And even California Sunshine Girl is good as well. But this album was only ever released in the US, and it did have 2 singles, I Wanna Live and Blue Rain Coming Down, neither of which charted. And we're on this label. So, after this album was complete, on July 1st, 1973, Roy and MGM parted. They let him out of the agreement and he turned over the masters, and that was kind of really it. But there's one CD we have to go for before we're talking about the re-releases of the MGM catalogue. This is MGM B Site Singles. This is a CD collection of songs that don't appear on MGM albums and singles of albums and stuff like that. So you have a lot of really great songs on here, a lot of really great ones here. I actually have this one on vinyl as well because I was able to get the vinyl of this individually on Amazon for some reason, because I thought this album never came out individually, but somebody must have been selling it individually on Amazon because I'd got it from there. And I really like the cover of the singles and like even like some of the ads for the singles as well. Like this one, Communication was a big hit in January, and this one is for February, and it's so good. Roy Orbison. So yeah, quite cool that they included that one there. And we're on this kind of adaptation to the blue and gold MGM label. It's a 2-album set, but with the CD, with the record it's a 2-record set, but with the CD it's just a single disc. So, so after Roy left MGM in 1973, there was quite a lot of like releases internationally on double album packages, and one of them was this, Focus on Roy Orbison, which is a selection of MGM tracks that appeared on different albums. So a lot of like rare stuff on here. This came out in 1976. I've kind of shown it before when I did my Roy Orbison vinyl collection video. So this is that one. And so within the 80s, Roy kind of got his career back on track with his touring and the Traveling Wilburys, and with In Dreams being used in Blue Velvet and the Black and White Night albums. And then and he was also recording Mystery Girl at the same time as well, and that was due to be released in 89. But then the ultimate final tragedy struck. Roy suffered a heart attack in December of 1988 and unfortunately died. And which obviously was a huge loss to his fans, and it really was a big shock to a lot of people. But then with his passing came a renewed interest in his music as well as his comeback. But there was also interest in the MGM catalogue, and amongst them was this. In the Singles Collection, 1965 to 1973. This is a selection of songs that were released as the MGM singles, and they're like the A-sides of the MGM singles. They're all here in a double album set. This was released in 89, just after Roy had passed. But then after that, they began to print the stuff again, and Barbara Orbison, who was his second wife, who he'd remarried during the MGM period, had noticed that she'd not really gotten kind of consent over the releasing of the album, and she looked into the agreement and realized that she should have gotten much more than a phone call, because Roy had owned the masters outside of the United States after the contract ended. Now, this was a good thing in the long run, but in the short term, the fact that the masters were held by two companies meant that the same fraction results as when it was held back in like the 60s or 70s. Without global focus, it wouldn't get the representation or push it needed. So in 2002, in the early 2000s, they began to release some of the MGM stuff again on compilations, which I've got like on CD. Like there's a Virgin compilation called Love Songs that has like some MGM stuff on it, and a Virgin compilation called the Platinum Collection that's got MGM stuff on it. Even Big Hits from the Big O's got an unreleased MGM track on it. So they began to release some stuff, and then the albums in 2004 came out. In 2004, they released the MGM Collection on CD for the first time here in the UK. In these albums, which I'll show, with this one, There's Only One Roy Orbison and the Orbison Way. This one, Volume 2, has the classic Roy Orbison and Cry Softly Lonely One. Volume 3, we have Roy Orbison sings Don Gibson and Hank Williams' The Roy Orbison Way, so kind of a pairing of the country artists that Roy covered during the MGM period. This one, which is probably my favourite, Many Moods and the Big O, paired on one CD. And the last one, this has three albums paired on two CDs. Roy Orbison sings Milestones and Memphis on two CDs in 2004. And that was kind of it. And the albums, I don't know if they came out individually or whatnot. But then in 2011, 23 years after Roy had passed, Barbara Orbison had also passed on the 23rd anniversary of Roy's passing, funnily enough. Well, bit of a strange coincidence. So they had been talking about the MGM catalogue for years prior to Barbara's passing. And they began to look into the agreement, and they began to look at releasing the album, and then they teamed up with Universal to release the MGM stuff on a global basis. They got the MGM tapes, the MGM master tapes, and they took the tapes and they began to work on the masters, and they started from the first album, and then they began to EQ the masters and kind of turn them up, and then they compared the tapes to the original vinyls and realized that the original records sounded better. And they made a CD of the vinyl, and they would listen to it, and they played it, and it sounded great. And they basically began balancing the tracks, EQing them. So for instance, 1965 to 1969, they used 3-track. So left for the vocals, right for the band and backing vocals. And then they rebalanced and remixed the 3 tracks, and they basically got it all, and they sounded great, and they remastered it, and they did some remixing from 69 to 73 as well. So a lot of the stuff was remastered and remixed for CD, and it sounds fantastic. You know, they were even able to bring up a lot of instruments that had been buried in the original mixes of these MGM albums. And also in 2015, one more thing before we wrap up the video, they released this album, One of the Lonely Ones, which was a selection of material that Roy had recorded in 1969, but it never got released. Basically, the story was his 2 eldest sons died in a fire, and basically Roy took most of 1968 off, and he went into the studio in early 69 and began recording these songs, and he continued recording until March so that he could do his UK tour. And when he came back, and in the summer, he came back and did a few more things in July, and it kind of concluded in August. And it was meant to be released in the first week of November, but the release schedule kind of got disrupted because Many Moods was basically due to be out in like the latter part of 68, and it got pushed into the spring of 69. And basically the release schedule got disrupted, and there was a contract dispute between Roy and MGM, and basically One of the Lonely Ones was shelved and it was never heard. And then in the early 2000s, they found these tapes in a storage facility, and basically they contacted Barbara, his wife, and they got the tapes back, and they didn't realise that this was actually meant to be an album until they checked all the recording dates on the recording logs, and they checked the tapes, and they realised that this was meant to be some kind of album. So they kind of got it together, and then they made this album. It's a really, really great album. I really love this album. I've also got it in vinyl as well. You've seen my Orbison vinyl collection video, and I've shown most of these there. So there we go, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. A bit of history behind the MGM catalogue as well as me showing the albums. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and let me know what you think of Roy's MGM period if you enjoyed this video or whatever, and see you next time.